There is an almost imperceptible instant in every relationship when the energy changes sides. There is no fight, there is no argument. Just a new silence that begins to fill the space previously occupied by anxiety, quick messages, and attempts to please. It is at this subtle point that the Stoic man stops seeking, not by giving up, but by awakening. What was once a routine of waiting for answers, confirmations, and validations now becomes a conscious pause. He no longer seeks outside what he needs to feel inside. The search turns into introspection. Restlessness becomes presence. And at that moment, something changes. First in him, then in her. She feels it. He doesn't understand exactly what is happening, but he notices the absence of that old pressure. What was once guaranteed now becomes scarce. The predictability of good morning and are you gone disappears, and in its place comes a new energy, calm, firm, secure. The man who acted out of desire now acts out of principle. He does not stop feeling but chooses not to react. He observes. He listens more than he talks. And this silence, once invisible, now becomes deafening. The big change is not in what he does, but in what he doesn't do. He doesn't play. He doesn't manipulate. He doesn't try to provoke. He just stops chasing after what he has always been running away from, approval. And when he stops, he finds himself. And when it meets, it becomes magnetic. It is the beginning of true transformation. The moment when need gives way to presence, where inner peace begins to speak louder than any external need. And when that happens, the dynamic changes, effortlessly, without explanation. It just changes. She doesn't see it coming. No cryptic message. No indirect on social networks. Just a strategic absence that does not hurt but transforms. The man who once orbited around her now returned to orbit around himself. And this realignment changes everything. He doesn't walk away in anger. He does not disappear out of pride. It only changes the center of gravity itself. He leaves emotional dependence and returns to self-control. To those who observe from the outside, it seems like nothing. But for those who feel it, it seems everything. She begins to notice the little things. Response times change. The reactions disappear. The justifications cease. It's not contempt, it's an internal priority. The Stoic man does not ignore. He just does not sell himself cheaper. It is in this intentional silence that he rebuilds his base. As she wonders what happened, he strengthens what was fragile, her connection to her own worth. He no longer needs to explain himself, because what really matters now is not to be understood. It is to be at peace. Without having to speak, he communicates with his posture. There is no hurry. It does not force encounters. It does not beg for attention. The control he regains is not over her. It is over himself. And this is the most powerful turn of all. The real power is not in dominating others, but in not being dominated by anyone. And when man understands this, he transcends the emotional game. It no longer needs external control, because finally he governs himself. There is a feeling that invades her heart when it changes. It's not anger. It is not fear. It's something more confusing. It's an unexplained loss. She feels that something has escaped, but she doesn't know what exactly. That's the power of Stoic detachment. She got used to the cycle. He chases it, she responds as she wants. He insists, she controls. But suddenly it stops, and the silence that remains has no logical explanation. He didn't disappear. He just stopped molding himself to her wishes. And the most disconcerting thing is that he is still there, present, serene, but distant. Not emotionally dependent, he is at peace. And this tranquility, as soft as it may seem, destabilizes. Because she feels the end of something she doesn't even know how to name. Detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. The Stoic does not close his heart. He just no longer allows his emotions to be a plaything in the hands of the other. He loves with conscience. He gives himself with limits, and he withdraws without drama, only with decision. While she looks for signs, he stands firm. As she teases, he watches. While she confuses, he simplifies. because he knows that a man's strength is not in how much he resists another, but in how much he knows himself. And it is this self-knowledge that touches her, because she didn't expect someone who didn't dance to her beat. Her detachment confuses, but his detachment transforms, because he shows, without words, that what was once a necessity is now a choice. She thought she had control, that he would always be there, that it was enough to pull the right rope and he would answer. But the illusion falls when the man finds himself again. And the Stoic, unlike the others, no longer responds to emotional triggers. He becomes the center itself. What was once a dance of dominance now becomes an enigma. He doesn't react. He does not confront. He does not justify himself. And that leaves her lost, because the control she thought she had wasn't hers. It was given by him. When the man withdraws the energy that sustained the game collapses. Without warning, no fuss, only the constant silence of someone who finally understood. No one deserves the power to control their peace. She revisits old messages, tries to understand where she lost the thread. But there is no mistake. There is no breaking point. Just a silent decision to no longer live according to the validation of others. And this generates discomfort. Because her ego wants answers. He wants a reaction. He wants drama. But the Stoic man no longer lives under emotional command. He lives under his own values. And this is not easily broken. True control lies precisely in knowing when to stop trying to control. And by doing so, man frees himself. And when he breaks free, he feels it and can no longer fit the pieces of a game he decided not to play. He is there. He did not run away. He didn't block it. It has not disappeared. But he also doesn't give himself up like before. The Stoic man has learned to be present without canceling himself. The greatest presence is the one that does not submit. It is the one that imposes itself without shouting. She sees. He still enjoys the photos. It still answers. But the energy is different. There is no more urgency. There is no more anxiety. The man who used to throw himself now walks. And this controlled slowness is what bothers us the most. He is not unreachable for revenge. It is unreachable by decision. Because he learned to value his energy, his time, his attention, and everything that is given consciously gains value. To each attempt at provocation, he responds calmly. At every sign of manipulation, he responds clearly. He no longer enters the emotional maelstrom. He watches the storm from the outside. And that vision keeps him steadfast. She misses not the man, but the control she had over him. And when she realizes that he is still there, but no longer available, something inside her stirs. Because now, to have it again, it is not enough to ask. It needs to deserve it. This is the new normal. The man who is but is not lost, who loves but does not forget, who hears but does not bend. The strength of a Stoic lies precisely in knowing that his presence is not an obligation, it is a privilege. The silence of an ordinary man can be confusion, but the silence of a Stoic is strategy. He is not silent out of weakness, but out of wisdom. When he stops responding at the same pace, suddenly and without warning, the absence of noise turns into an emotional bang for those who were used to constant attention. She tries to understand the reason for the change. She asks herself what she did wrong. But there was no mistake, just an internal realignment. The man did not remain silent out of sorrow, but because he found in stillness a path more powerful than any argument. His silence is not empty. He is loaded with presence. He didn't disappear. He just stopped being predictable. He stopped responding on impulse, reacting out of necessity. He now responds to his own truth. Every notification that doesn't arrive, every message that doesn't come, every gesture of presence that was once routine is now an exception. And this creates an internal echo in her, an uncomfortable noise that reveals what has always been invisible. Emotional dependence disguised as control. His serenity creates confusion in her, because she doesn't know how to deal with a man who doesn't need to prove anything. That he does not despair. That does not change. And the more she tries to resume the previous rhythm, the more he remains unshaken. This is the essence of the silence that screams. It does not impose itself, but it has an impact. He does not accuse, but reveals. And it is precisely in this absence of noise that she begins to hear more clearly, not his voice, but the very emptiness that the control disguised. Interest is predictable. It is in the gestures, in the messages, in the constancy. But conscious indifference is uncharted terrain. When the stoic man stops chasing, her ego feels the impact, not because of nostalgia, but because of the loss of dominance. She confuses this new posture with disinterest. But that's not it. He continues to observe, present in his own way, but he no longer molds himself to empty caresses or reacts to calculated provocations. He exchanged emotional play for self-control. This kind of indifference is not contempt, it is discernment. He knows what is worth your attention. He knows how much earlier he gave himself in excess. And now, in silence, he rearranges his energy. There is no hurt. There is wisdom. And that wisdom hurts her ego more than any words, because she realizes that she has lost space where she once reigned. What was predictable is now uncertain. What was guaranteed now requires merit. And this new reality disarms her. She tries to compensate with charm, with memories, with nostalgia. But nothing seems to have an effect. Because the man who was predictable is now a selective presence. It's available, but not affordable. This is the difference between interest and selective attention. The first comes from necessity. The second comes from choice. And when man begins to choose himself, he becomes enigmatic. And what is enigmatic inevitably becomes attractive. Desire is ephemeral. It comes and goes with time, with humor, with the moment. But direction is lasting. When the stoic man decides to live with purpose, he stops being a hunter of passing emotions and becomes an architect of his own life. She notices that he hasn't disappeared, but is more focused. The conversations decrease, but his energy has increased. He's building something bigger than an exchange of messages. He's investing in himself, in his goals, in his mission. This changes the perception she has of him, because he stops being a man waiting for attention and becomes someone on the move. And what is in motion does not depend on the response of the other to exist. It is guided by something internal. This type of man does not need to prove anything. He does not become valuable by being desired, but by knowing where he is going. Its stability attracts more than 1,000 sweet words, and its silent focus is louder than any statement. She realizes that she is no longer the center, and that perhaps it never was, because now everything he does has direction, has rhythm, has meaning. He doesn't wake up expecting messages. He wakes up with goals, and that makes it scarce, not by absence, but by occupation with what really matters. A man with purpose is not there to fill anyone's void. He is there to live with intention, and that inevitably makes it rare. She thought he would always be there, that his care was guaranteed, that his attention was permanent. But the centered man is like a river. He runs until he realizes that he is irrigating soil that does not flourish. And then the course changes. She begins to feel his absence even before he leaves. Because he doesn't disappear, he withdraws. First emotionally, then physically. And when she realizes, she is no longer the same man. And maybe it's too late. He is not bitter nor vengeful. He just turned inward. And this internal movement changes everything. Because now he acts with maturity, with logic, with purpose. He no longer lives to please. He lives to evolve. She tries to pull back what she has lost, but she doesn't find the same connection. Because he no longer responds to the same baits. She confuses this new behavior with coldness, but she is not. It is lucidity. The centered man does not deny his emotions. He only guides them. And this protects him from returning to patterns that no longer serve him. He does not regret being careful, but he understands the value of not insisting where there is no reciprocity. The price she pays is not the withdrawal, It is the awareness that he has lost a man who was willing to stay until he chose to leave for himself. And this kind of loss is the hardest to accept. Reaction is all she expects. A crossed word, a reactive disappearance, an impulsive response. But when she teases and receives only silence, when she tests and finds peace, the game no longer works. The cycle breaks. The stoic man learned not to react, not out of weakness but out of strength, because he knows that every provocation has a purpose, to lead back to the old dance. But he doesn't dance anymore, he observes. He takes a deep breath before acting. He thinks before he answers. And sometimes he chooses not to say anything, because he knows that the real power is in the pause. It is there that he masters himself and shows that he's no longer bound by anyone's emotional script. She feels it, and each frustrated attempt to trigger a response only reinforces the new cycle. The cycle of man who is no longer emotionally predictable. That is not guided by neediness but by clarity. This type of presence causes confusion, because she no longer knows if he still feels something or if he has simply transcended. But he knows. Feeling is not the problem is getting lost. And he chose not to get lost anymore. When the man stops reacting, he breaks the repetition. It leaves the role of peace and becomes the board. He doesn't play to win, he plays not to lose himself. And in this, he gains something even greater, peace. When the stoic man walks away, it is not always a goodbye. Often it's just a repositioning. And it is precisely this silence that provokes a new type of reaction in her, the test. Small messages, random likes, calculated indirects. But what she seeks, in fact, is not him. It is the sense of control she has lost. These tests are not necessarily conscious. They are responses from the ego that wants to validate its influence. She wants to know, does he still feel something? Can I still mess with him? And each attempt comes disguised as a coincidence. The common man would interpret it as longing, interest, or reconciliation. But the Stoic sees it clearly. This is just the echo of an emotional structure trying to rebalance itself. He understands that not every affectionate gesture is love. Sometimes it's just a need, and so he observes. He does not respond immediately. Don't be fooled by nostalgia, because he has already learned that going back to the previous cycle is giving up his own evolution. And he will not regress just because she is not ready to advance. She feels that something has changed, that the power of before no longer works, and that disarms her. The psychological game loses strength in the face of someone who no longer plays. And instead of reaction, she finds only serenity, a serenity that does not give way. The Stoic man may respond, but he does not return to the old role. It does not revive toxic dynamics, because now he is another. He doesn't fight for attention. He aligns himself with the truth. And this truth, sooner or later, transforms her perception. It begins to oscillate. One day, affectionate. The next, cold. At one point, he says he misses it. The next, he ignores it. These variations are not random. They are desperate attempts to understand the new equilibrium. That man who used to react to everything now remains motionless. This behavior of hers is not always conscious, but it reflects the discomfort of someone who no longer knows which button to press. The heat is an invitation, the cold, a test. She wants to see how far he can take it, if he still cares, if he's still emotionally available. The common man would easily enter this cycle. I would try to please, confront, or explain. But the Stoic man watches, as if reading a book that already knows the ending. He understands that these oscillations are not pure feelings, but reflections of instability, and this instability is born from the loss of power. Because when control slips away, the ego goes into survival mode. But the Stoic does not feed this ego, neither hers nor her own. He just doesn't get contaminated. He remains. This remaining is not passivity. It is firmness. He seeks neither consolation nor revenge. He observes, understands, but does not get lost, because he knows that the biggest trap is not withdrawal, but return without awareness. The invisible war ends when one side stops fighting. And the Stoic wins not by dominating the other, but by dominating himself. And in the face of that, what remains in her is not anger. It is reflection. True transformation begins there. She expected everything but that. I expected a fight, a cross answer, a justification. But he received silence. He received maturity, received someone who no longer plays the game. And it is exactly this absence of reaction that causes the greatest impact. The Stoic man does not want to win. He wants peace. And for this reason, he does not allow himself to be manipulated by other people's emotions. He is not cold, but he is firm. It is not distant, but it is selective. And this selectivity dismantles the emotional structure of those who have become accustomed to dominating by intensity. Every time she tries to provoke and gets no return, something inside her starts to crumble. Because the value she attributed to herself was, in part, based on his answer. Without an answer, the question arises, do I still have this power? Elaine, this type of questioning does not arise when there is a confrontation. It arises when there is neutrality, when the other party stands firm. And the most uncomfortable thing is to realize that he didn't step away to teach any lessons. He just stopped reacting. His absence is now a different presence, one that does not let itself be shaken, one that doesn't respond to triggers. And that makes her rethink everything, because what seemed predictable is now an enigma. And the enigma always attracts more than the evident. The biggest impact comes not from shouting, but from serenity. And when man understands this, he stops investing energy where there is no return. Because the strategic absence is not a punishment, it is a protection. And she, deep down, feels it. The Stoic man does not need speeches. His posture speaks for him. The way he doesn't hurry, the way he keeps his cool in the face of chaos, the way he listens more than he rebuts, all of this communicates a strength that words could never reach. She realizes that she no longer needs verbal evidence. That the man who is there still, attentive, serene, is worth more than 1,000 justifications. Because he doesn't hide behind beautiful phrases. He is simply what he is. This silent presence creates a different emotional tension. There are no guarantees. There are no promises. There is a connection based on essence. And this destabilizes those who expected control through speech. His power is not in convincing. It is in being. And that makes it magnetic. He doesn't beg, he does not argue, he just demonstrates. And in this effortless demonstration, he changes her perception of what masculine strength is. His masculinity is calm. He does not impose himself by shouting, but by constancy. He does not seek to be accepted, he seeks to live with integrity. And for this reason, even in silence, he commands respect. The new language of the strong man is not made up of arguments. It is made of self-control, focus, and clarity. And when she realizes this, she understands that she is facing someone rare, someone who does not seek to impress, but to express who she really is. The emotional game has always had invisible rules: provoke, test, measure reactions. But the Stoic man was never playing. He just tried to connect. And when he understood that it was not reciprocity, but manipulation, he left the match. She starts to see it late. He realizes that he did not retreat out of pride, but out of self-respect. That his silence was not punishment, but protection. And that the estrangement was not drama, it was liberation. The most disconcerting thing is that he does not blame her. Just move on. There is no grudge, no charge. There is only a clarity that dismantles what was sustained by illusions. She realizes that she has not lost just any man. He lost a conscious man. He is not seeking revenge. He doesn't want to prove value. He knows who he is. And that changes everything. Because while many men react out of pain, he responded with evolution. And evolution is something that does not go back. The end of the illusion happens when the ego no longer encounters resistance. When everything she tried to control, she now lives free. And this forces her to look at herself. to see where he missed the chance to connect with someone who just wanted to be true. The man who does not gamble is the most dangerous because he plays with his own conscience. He doesn't need to beat anyone. He has already conquered himself. And that, in the end, is what makes her understand. He never had to play. She's the one who's always been playing alone.